Okay, well, it's not often you get the privilege of having your colleagues from state and territory regulators physically in the room, and I really want to acknowledge the team that are here. We've had a couple of substitutes. I also want to acknowledge that Natasha Mann, who was going to be online from New South Wales, is unwell today, and we have a different Natasha to replace her, but we're very grateful. Thank you for Natasha's coming at short notice. I'm just going to sort of jump right in because I know there'll be lots of questions, and I'm going to be very free-flowing with people's opportunities to answer those questions. So I am going to start though, and I'm going to start with Craig at the end from Queensland. Maybe, I think we've got enough microphones, maybe we only have to share a little bit. If you want to tell us what's happening in your jurisdiction about the hot topic that this conference always asks about, and that is the harmonisation of fundraising laws. Maybe, and feel free to obviously introduce yourself.
Is this working?
Yep.
Can we turn it off, please?
Yeah. And holding them up close is great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose this is always going to get asked. We are continuing to work with our policy people and Queensland Parliamentary Council to get towards codifying those principles. I don't have a concrete time frame at the moment, but I understand that I'll be able to provide, my replacement will provide an update in the next quarter of 2025.
Hi, I'm Kat Fleck from Access Canberra. We serve the ACT community by delivering the majority of our licensing and registration services. So charitable collections for us is a very small component of what we do, but I'm very happy to say that we have fully implemented the National Fundraising Conduct Principles, and simultaneously to that we've also adjusted our ACT legislation, repealed certain things that didn't quite align so that we can be ensuring a consistent approach that's going to provide charities and donors with a clear understanding of what those conduct expectations are.
Hi everybody, I'm Robyn Pearce. I'm the Executive Director of Consumer Building and Occupational Services in Tasmania. So we're the regulator that looks after all of the building, electrical, gas safety, as well as consumer affairs, corporate affairs, residential tenancy. Just like most small jurisdictions, we've got a fairly broad remit. In relation to harmonisation, Tasmania has lodged 2 bills in the Parliament so far in order to introduce harmonisation. Unfortunately, we've had 2 elections that have been called prior to those bills getting through both houses. So unfortunately, the bills have lapsed, and currently we are still in caretaker mode, as you may well know, waiting the outcome of the next election. Obviously, when we have an incoming government, that government will be briefed on the progress and the issues, and they'll make their decisions in terms of what their policy position will be going forward.
Hello everyone, I'm Chantale Hore. I'm from the Northern Territory. Our particular business unit also does occupational licensing and compliance activities, and a major component of that is incorporated associations and cooperatives, which is very small. Our jurisdiction only has about 250,000 people, so we don't actually have any fundraising legislation. We are working to develop and provide supports for the national principles for fundraising, and to make everyone aware, and then continue to provide support to others in the industry, all of our other jurisdictions.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nicole Rich. I'm the Director of Consumer Affairs Victoria. So, of course, in good style, Sue, I was the last person to arrive at the session. Just in time. And thanks for inviting us today. So I think people would probably know, if they're based here, that we've fully implemented the harmonisation reform. So they've been in place for, I think, over 12 months now. And if you're registered with the ACNC, you just need to notify us that you're fundraising in Victoria, and that's it. You don't need to do any registration or further requirements, and the principles apply to your conduct rather than the more specific conduct regulation under our Fundraising Act. If you're not registered with the ACNC, then those other laws continue to apply to you. But it's great to have them implemented.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Trish Blake, Commissioner for Consumer Protection in Western Australia. So I can finally say happily that our legislation is in Parliament because it's national legislation. It's been referred to the Committee on Uniform Legislation. That happened in May, so we're hopeful that they will have their report about mid-August, and then hopefully from there the legislation will run smoothly and quickly through Parliament. So we would be anticipating having the last steps of our alignment in place by the end of the year, fingers crossed. Hopefully I haven't just jinxed it.
Thanks, Tricia. And Natasha?
Hi, I'm Natasha Luschwitz. I'm from the Policy and Delivery branch at New South Wales Fair Trading. I do have the responsibility in supporting government with its legislative reforms in this space. In 2024, the New South Wales Parliament passed a bill to lay the groundwork for the deemed recognition model in New South Wales. From June this year, we doubled the financial reporting thresholds for all incorporated associations in New South Wales. And so this aligns New South Wales now with other jurisdictions to reduce that regulatory burden. Now we're working to deliver on the national commitment more broadly. So this will involve incorporating the principles into our charitable fundraising regulation, and we're on track for delivering on those reforms by the end of the year.
Thank you. There's nothing like making it a competition. I know the people perhaps here are the spokespeople and not always able to deal with elections and changes of government, but I hope that gives people a snapshot of where we're at. I think what's also very clear when I speak to my colleagues is how many other things they regulate. And I think if we put up a list, we'd probably cover most, between all the jurisdictions. That would be really very insightful, that it can go from rooming houses to, I remember Victoria once had something to do with organic eggs, fundraising and the like. They all fit together somehow, and these are the wonderful people that do that. But I do think, I thought that the panel might like to jump in, not necessarily all in order, but I might start with you, Nicole, because they also, with one perhaps exception, also regulate under the Australian consumer law. And we know that when you're talking about misleading and deceptive conduct and the like, that it can also apply in the fundraising space. So I'm interested, when it's pretty much the same regulators with both hats, how they find that interplay. And I thought Nicole might go first, because the well-publicised now Netflix series case of the Bell Gibson case, that was done using the Australian consumer law, and I thought that might be a useful insight for this audience.
Thanks, Sue. I didn't get to do that thing where it's like, who would play you on a TV show? That because it was the action against Bell Gibson was taken before my time, so I've just inherited it. So fortunately missed out on apple cider vinegar. But that's right. We did take quite large proceedings against Ms Gibson at the time, and that was under the Australian consumer law in the federal court. And I think probably, as a general rule, I would say that both the Australian consumer law and our fundraising regulation can be relevant depending on the circumstances, the issues that are arising. And we're all regulators, so we could probably talk about this all afternoon about, using the right tool to get the right impact depending on the nature of the conduct. I think you've got a session on on your compliance approach coming up, so you'll get into that a bit more in your space. So that's true here. We'll sort of look at things on a case-by-case basis and have a look at what the actual conduct of concern is, what's the harm to the public that we're concerned about, or the risk of harm, and then how do we address that? Probably a good thing to note about the consumer law is that it only applies to conduct in trade or commerce. So, for example, if the concerns about Ms Gibson's misrepresentations had been solely about things she'd said to elicit donations to the Cancer Council, for example, I don't think that would have been captured by the prohibitions under the Australian consumer law. But our case was based on, now found to be proven, misrepresentations and unconscionable conduct in relation to the sale of her book and her app. So that's in trade or commerce, which meant that the Australian consumer law applied and we were able to use that, and the penalties are quite large under the consumer law, so it's can be quite an effective tool. But otherwise we would be relying on the fundraising law. So in a lot of your contexts, the Australian consumer law may not apply. But for example, you're running a store, could be running quite a large commercial operation where the profits you make from that go into your charitable purposes. The running of that business, etc., would probably be captured by the Australian consumer law. So if you did something dodgy in the running of your commercial operations there, then that would potentially be covered. But the actual conduct in relation to eliciting, say, donations or funds wouldn't necessarily. We just talked about the harmonisation as well, and I just found a newfound appreciation for my policy team when you're all talking, because I remember when they came and said, we found a way to implement this through the regulations and we don't have to go to Parliament, and I was like, oh, is that really going to work? But now I think, wow, that was actually amazing, because it meant we could just implement through regulations rather than changing the law. But what that means is that even if you're registered with the ACNC in Victoria and those kind of harmonisation you still have to comply with the principles, and you also are still captured by the Fundraising Act's prohibition on misrepresentations in fundraising. So you don't have to comply with all those kind of like very specific about wearing a badge and the receptacle, etc. You can just comply with the principles, which is really helpful. But the Act still clearly prohibits making misrepresentations in your fundraising activities. So that would still apply regardless of whether you are registered with us or registered with the ACNC.
Thanks. And obviously sometimes too charities are the people, the organisations harmed by the misrepresentation of people who are purporting to be their charity or raising funds on their behalf. Craig, I think you look like you want to chip in.
Yeah, I just did want to chuck in something there. I mean, what Nicole said was correct, but I think it's reasonable to say that regardless of what the law says, when you're, as a charity, your reputation and the reputation of the industry is critical, and when there's bad actors, it can bring everything down. So just the general tenets of the ACL are being transparent, honest and responsible when you're dealing with people, I think is a good thing. The other thing in terms of what I consider to be important in regulation, what we've got in here is a group of people who are obviously very, very committed to what they do and are more than likely to be very compliant with their obligations. So it's not always about, it is about red tape reduction to help groups like yourselves meet your requirements. But another part of regulation, at least from my perspective, is to level the playing field. So where there are bad actors, we should be able to do our thing, get them out of the industry, confiscate their money, which we can in Queensland, which rights that reputational risk, but also creates a level playing field where we then can continue to reduce that red tape. And very much like Victoria's, state of Victoria, the ACL is relevant. The ACCC's got a really good guide on this for fundraisers. If you want to have a look, it's online. But the other thing is making sure that we get out those people that are ruining the reputation of fundraisers in general.
I'll just check, Natasha, because you're online, it's a bit harder to... Did you want to chip in there?
I would just reflect, similarly in New South Wales, the focus is on reducing consumer harm. So in addition to, I think in the past 12 months, we've finalised about 13 investigations. Mainly they have related to fundraising without an authority. But we also do, I just wanted to build on those comments about getting bad actors out. We do a lot of education with individuals about how to ensure that when it comes to fundraising that they're engaging with legitimate fundraisers. We, from a New South Wales perspective, in particular on the back of successive disasters, it has been an area where there's been concern and we certainly get inquiries and complaints, and Australians are generous during on the back of disasters, and that's an area of focus for us certainly, in addition to the broader regulatory field.
Yes, and we certainly work together around we have an annual Safe Giving program to actually, again, emphasise the importance of checking the register in our case, to make sure that they are a verified charity and for people to, get the information they might want before they donate. But I think...
Yes. So I was just going to picking up on Nicole and Craig and talking about reputation. In Western Australia, fortunately, we haven't had to do a lot of investigation or enforcement work, but where we do start to see some issues creep in is when charities outsource their charitable collection. And so when you're using professional businesses, you as a charity still need to retain control over your reputation in that space. And that's where we start to see a little bit of slippage on conduct, and particularly with things like, the complaints we get from consumers in the community is generally about what they call the chuggers, so the people on the corner that will try and get people to sign up. And also for us in consumer protection, because we have ScamNet, and so we're very attuned to scams, we will often be telling consumers, do not give your details to somebody who approaches you on the street. So if that is your mode of collection, then perhaps in WA you might want to pivot, because we spend a lot of time telling consumers, don't give your money that way, and in fact go direct to the charity of choice and go through their website and give your details out that way.
Thank you. Chantale, can you just explain to us, because I know it's different in the Northern Territory, just even how you're structured, and I think that's maybe interesting for people.
The Northern Territory is slightly different in the sense that in February 2023, the Commissioner of Consumer Affairs was removed as the authority and replaced with a person appointed by the Minister of the Department who is managing that particular area at the time. We all know that changes of government cause changes of department. So because of that aspect, and it's applicable to second-hand dealers and pawnbrokers and other consumer affairs matters, we've had a bit of a division of duties and the authority. We work very closely together to raise these issues, and quite often when there is a complaint or compliance activity, it's under multiple different portions of legislation, whether it's ACL or through us. So we'll come and get you twice if we can, but I'm just joking. We don't actually do that, but we work very closely together. When I spoke with the Commissioner the other day, she said we don't actually have a lot of fundraising complaints. There isn't a lot of need in the Northern Territory at this point, but it is an issue that we talk about quite regularly.
Thank you. I might leave that one. I'm very conscious of allowing time for questions, but I did want to sort of maybe do another quick roll call. Maybe I'll do it in the reverse order, because there's a lot of expertise at this table, and I thought it might be useful for them to share tips, suggestions around hot topics that you do see, because as we know, charities are often at the coalface in their local community, and we're a national regulator. You're on the ground in your separate jurisdictions, and I certainly know from my recent trip to the NT that it's a very different place, and we need to respect that. So maybe it's about internal disputes, maybe it's about changes to documents that's already come up. But I might start with you, Natasha.
Look, the main thing from a New South Wales fair trading perspective, we're trying to support charities as much as possible with as much online information, documentation, checklists, etc. to support. We're really mindful. There's a huge continuum in terms of new charities coming in and their familiarity with their legal obligations through to very expert, and so we cater across that. Don't be afraid to reach out to get support. That's one of the things that we support with is how charities are communicating, ensuring that they're doing that without concerns in relation to misleading, in relation to the charities that they're actioning for, and we welcome that sort of early engagement from new charities in particular.
Thanks. Trish?
Yes, I think I've already touched on what our tips would be for Western Australia. So particularly Obviously, it's a very difficult space for you all to be operating in, given the scams that are happening around you. So again, if you do see websites or even on some of the giving platforms that appear to be mimicking your entity, please report it to either Scam Watch at the Commonwealth and the National Anti-Scam Centre, or if it's in Western Australia, report it to us, or go to the domain name and get them taken down as quickly as possible. Do look at your own cybersecurity practices and make sure that your own websites and the information that you hold is as secure as possible, because we've certainly seen a lot of data hacks lately, and people are becoming much more aware of the value of their own personal data. So when they give it to you as a charity, they're going to want to know that it's being held very, very securely and won't be necessarily lost to the dark web. And I know that these all then pose challenges for you, because that makes it harder for people. People perhaps are a little bit less reluctant to hand over their credit card details and things like that. So certainly, as one cybersecurity practice I would encourage you is, if you don't need to keep the credit card details in your records, then don't. Like, just take it for that one charge and then get rid of it, because that's the kind of thing. And make that clear to people who are going to be donating online, because that will be something that will reassure people that it's safe for them to give that detail. It'll be used that once off, and then it's deleted, and it's not going to be subject to a hack later on. In terms of what we're doing for charities in Western Australia, as I said, we're hopefully going to get this legislation through this year. We have finally moved quite a few of our forms to online. I know it sounds like a really odd thing to celebrate in 2025, that we've gone to online forms, but as those of us that work in government know, sometimes the wheels turn extra slow in our space. So we have moved a lot of our forms to online. We have also updated most of our pages in Consumer Protection's website. Charities one, I was having a look at it again last night. It's still a bit old and clunky. So I'll make sure we get onto that and get it in some really nice, plain, easy to understand language, and also lots of points to the ACNC's website. But our goal is to expand our capacity to support all of you when you ring up with inquiries and that, because we want to be an enabler and not a bottleneck. So if you are experiencing any difficulties in Western Australia, please feel free to reach out to me, because I'd like to be able to deal with them as soon as we can.
Thank you. Nicole?
I don't have too much to add. I mean, I absolutely agree with a lot of the comments that have been made and some of the tips as well. We've been doing quite a bit. Sometimes find fundraising concerns seem to go in ebbs and flows. Like, we'll have a year where we're not really getting any concerns or complaints, and suddenly we'll get sort of an influx. I've even been doing a few radio spots lately around fundraising, because it's probably one of the higher peaks for some reason. It's got a number of investigations, etc. But to the earlier points, probably not of charities registered with the ACNC or this audience, but we do take really seriously our role around, to sort of some of Craig's points, some of the similarities around the principles, that we're not trying to get to intervene in what people are raising for or what they're doing, but making sure that the public is protected, they're not being scammed, that what they donate to is actually going to those causes, and the sorts of principles that drive our action. So I might just say that, if you are Victorian-based and you've ever got any queries, there's a lot of information on the Consumer Affairs website about fundraising, about incorporated associations. It's really good quality, so please go there, and you can inform yourself on a range of issues. And similarly to Trish, I was just going to say, you will know more about what's happening on the ground than us. If there's some issues we haven't covered, or something that's a concern, please feel free to reach out even to me directly. I do want to know about it, and we can action that. So, would be really happy to hear about any issues we haven't covered yet.
Thank you. Chantale?
We've been working very hard on our educational resources on our website, and they're continually expanding. We've recently engaged a couple of governance experts to provide public sessions. If you're in the Northern Territory, register, it's free. It's a really good place to get some basics or do a refresh on being incorporated, being a not-for-profit, and then the ongoing layers that we like to call the charity status and your ABN, ATO aspects. If you have problems or concerns, contact a regulator, contact someone straight away. We're here to help. Our biggest issue is that nobody contacts us until it's far too late, or the conflict has grown so much that you are having too much trouble, you can't operate, you can't do your main purpose. So definitely reach out. We're happy to help.
Thank you. Robyn?
Thank you. So look, from a Tasmanian perspective, we tend to see very little by way of issues around fundraising concerns or complaints about false or misleading behaviour. Most of our contact tends to be around issues around people needing to be able to access information more readily about their registration with us. And our biggest challenge is probably is getting annual returns in for those that aren't registered with the ACNC. We do at times get contact in relation to internal disputes that are happening. Those are actually regulated under our associations legislation rather than our charities legislation, which is really just focused on collections. And, you know, as a regulator, that's not a space that we can actually step into. That's actually something that is usually covered by the constitution of the association, or if not, then there are model rules of association that form part of the legislation, and that can provide pathways for arbitration and conciliation. But it's often a matter of us being able to provide some advice, and ultimately it's a matter for the association to sort out in accordance with its rules, which may also at times provide access to the court system if there are particular behaviours that meet the standard, that'll refer it off to the courts. As a regulator, I think it's probably fair to say that there's a fair bit of modernisation that's needed in some of our approaches in the way that people can access information, and we're actually going through a reform program across all of the areas we regulate, the 43 odd pieces of legislation, to look at how can we actually be a better regulator, and that includes the way that we engage with our stakeholders, the way that we deliver our services, what our processes are, and where there are actually opportunities to reduce duplication and make it access a lot easier.
Thank you. ACT is very similar to Tasmania. We're quite small, I think smaller. But we do have the similar information and issues that you experience down there. One of our biggest issues that we're seeing coming up is actually a little bit of confusion about who to report to. So if you're registered with the ACNC or you're licensed in the ACT, and what you need to provide to either people. Most of that's covered off on either the ACNC website or our website. We update each other's information fairly regularly to make sure that we're all playing on the same field. And then also with harmonisation, we only put that in 12 months ago. So we haven't actually heard any feedback from the sector as to whether that's working well or not. So we'd love to hear about it, to see if there's anything that we can do better in that respect. And finally, because of the harmonisation, we've now looked on our website and the information that we provide, and our guideline's very out of date. So we are in the final stages of updating that, and we're hoping to have that launched online towards the end of the year.
Thank you. Craig?
I'll be super quick. That's the benefit of being at the end. I can say yes, all of that. Three things, I guess. Returns, if you're not ACNC registered, the majority of the time people say, I just forgot about it, so put a bring up in. Second thing is, you talked about it, about internal disputes, Tasmania. That's a pretty big issue for us because we've got 30,000 incorporated associations, and when people in those associations get cranky at each other, they're really cranky. So have a dispute resolution process. Law changes in Queensland last year made it mandatory to adopt model rules in this regard because it was becoming such an issue. It's not a real issue for the regulator, although we do get pulled into it, but your only other avenue is through the Supreme Court, which just ruins everyone's time and money and brain cells. So I think that's really important. And the other thing is, yes, we're working on getting more of our forms online as well, including in the charitable non-profit space. So that's it.
Thank you.
Probably, Sue, the other one last thing, if I can jump back in, just to flag too, is just to remember that online funding or crowdfunding, if it's the web doesn't recognise borders, so if you're doing any online or funding or crowdfunding, don't forget that you may need to register in all of the jurisdictions, since it's available for our consumers to be able to access it as well.
So when you fill out your annual information statement, you make sure you tick that you're doing online fundraising. and then it's much more streamlined. Now I'm looking at Tim. I know I'm also looking at my watch, but if there's a couple of burning questions while we have this group here, and I know they're staying around mostly, so there'll be other opportunities perhaps in the break.
So Robyn's probably answered the question about online fundraising. And while I'm at it, if you can please ensure that you include any fundraising licence number in the annual information statement, that will assist with any data sharing with our friends on stage. So it's probably just a bit more future focused. So do you have any views about whether the current laws are fit for purpose given AI-powered donor tools and the way that impacts on fundraising? Anyone
want to jump in?
I'll take the easy step and say I'm sorry, we're in caretaker mode, so I can't comment on future policy.
That's cheating. Look, I think the reality is AI changes everything. So when I'm looking at our Charitable Collections Act, which I was doing recently, it's 1946. And it talks about this current war. It's not going to be fit for purpose for AI. But I think, again, it brings it also back to what I was referring to earlier as well in terms of your cybersecurity practices, because whilst AI is a fantastic tool that we can use and adopt and we want to, it also comes with some risks attached to it. So if you are going to be using AI, make sure, as the Minister said earlier this morning, you're using it for good and not for evil, and that you have proper protections in place, and it doesn't replace the human oversight that needs to happen to make sure that the results that you're getting are, and the numbers that you're getting, etc., are verified humanly. But certainly I think there is always scope for improving and future-proofing our legislation a bit more.
We'd have to hope that principles-based, as we've moved to those principles-based, is some good step to protect future-proof, which was part of the big push for that.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Burning platform, or Tim?
It's probably more about, do you see any emerging or new risks in your work in the last year or two?
May I make a comment?
Yes, thank you.
In speaking with our Commissioner, she identified that a lot of not-for-profits are purchasing or using online platforms for crowdfunding and collections. In doing that, often the party isn't aware that there's a donation that's selected. So if you're selling tickets to an event, you may not be aware that there's an automatic donation applied at the end. So if you're not double-checking your total expenditure, or you're buying a free ticket and you see a cost at the bottom, you might not be aware that you're either seeking donations through that platform to someone else, which you didn't authorise, or that the party wasn't aware that that would be happening either.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go with a very popular and long-standing question. Is any jurisdiction looking at adopting a common definition of charity with the ACNC or each other?
I'm going to take that. The beauty of getting to know better our co-regulators means that we can start to have those discussions. I mean, I think everyone knows that is a hot topic, and increasingly so with organisations, small organisations working across borders, particularly because it's easy to be small and work online. So we're so conscientious that we're meeting after this event and then again tomorrow. So we are maximising the time we have together, and I think on our agenda is looking to the future, so that may well be one of the conversations that we have this afternoon. I'm not going to put anyone else on the spot for that, because none of us are actually the policy makers, but we can certainly look at the evidence base for what could be improved over time. I think because my boss is looking at me and she's saying it's time to get off the stage, but I do want you to please...
Which one are you talking about? She was saying, if not, why not?
the cruise controller. Anyway, please thank my colleagues from all the jurisdictions. Thank you very much.